While we were having breakfast, my 7-year-old granddaughter pointed at her plate of food. "Grandma, there's something weird here." When I looked, I froze, unable to say a word. My son took his daughter into the next room, and trembling, he dialed 911. I'm glad you're here. If you're watching this video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story of revenge from. I want to know how far it has traveled. I woke up in my small house on the outskirts of New York, where the birds singing in the yard mixed with the sound of cars passing on the paved alley. I put the coffee pot on the counter and listened to the sizzle coming from the kitchen. The aroma of sautéed onions from the chicken noodle soup that Martha, my daughter-in-law, was preparing drifted into the air, bringing a warm, familiar feeling, as if everything was as peaceful as ever. I sat down in the old wooden chair at the corner of the table. The first rays of sun came through the window, painting golden reflections on the tile floor. From the hallway, I heard the little footsteps of Sophia, my granddaughter. The girl, who was barely 6 years old, with her hair tied up in a loose bun and her feet bare, was running all over the house, clutching her faded rag doll. She was humming a children's tune, no clear words, but enough to make me smile. Sophia was my light, the reason I still felt life was worthwhile, even though the years were getting heavier than I had imagined. At the other end of the table, Robert, my son, was looking at his phone, his brow slightly furrowed as he read the morning news. "Sophia, sit properly, honey," he said in a deep voice, full of tenderness. Robert had always been a family man, hard-working, attentive. But I knew deep down he carried burdens he never mentioned. I looked at him and felt a mix of pride and sadness. The boy I raised was now a father, but sometimes I still saw him as that little one who hid in my arms whenever he was scared. Martha came out of the kitchen with a tray full of steaming chicken soup bowls. The smell of the broth, slow-cooked and with a touch of fresh parsley, made me hungry. "Today's soup is special, Mom," she said, smiling as always. "I let the chicken bones simmer overnight so they'd release all the flavor." I nodded gratefully, appreciating her dedication. Martha had been with Robert for 8 years, and although sometimes I felt an invisible distance between us, I always tried to see her as a daughter. I took a spoonful of soup, blew gently to cool it, and tasted it. The deep flavor of the broth, the right amount of salt, and the small grease droplets floating on the surface made me nod with satisfaction. But then, Sophia's eyes fixed on my bowl. The girl tilted her head, her little brow furrowed, and said in her small voice, "Grandma, there's something white in there." I was surprised, put down my spoon, and leaned in to look. Between the golden layer of fat, I saw tiny, undissolved grains, clustered in small spots that floated like lost snowflakes. I felt a slight shiver, a disquiet that ran through my chest. "It must be salt, honey," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm so as not to alarm her. But inside, I couldn't help but think, salt dissolves. Why isn't that? Martha returned from the kitchen with a plate of biscuits in her hand. Her smile paused for just an instant, long enough for me to notice. "Oh, it must be cornstarch," she said quickly, in the same sweet tone as always. I added a little extra to make the soup thicker. I nodded, but the hand holding my spoon trembled slightly. Sophia, with the innocence of a child, happily went back to eating. I watched her, and something inside me tightened. I wanted to believe Martha. I wanted to think it was just cornstarch, but there was something in her gaze that wouldn't let me be at peace. Robert, who had been checking his phone, looked up when he heard Sophia speak. He joked with me, "Aren't you going to eat, Mom? If you don't, all of Martha's effort will be for nothing." I smiled awkwardly. I stirred the spoon in the bowl of soup, but didn't bring it to my mouth. Martha's gaze flickered to my plate, so quickly I almost thought I'd imagined it. But no, I saw it clearly. That look was not one of worry, but of control, as if she was waiting for something. Suddenly, I felt slightly dizzy. My heart began to beat faster, not from nerves, but with a strange, hurried rhythm. My hand trembled a bit. The spoon hit the edge of the bowl, and it made a small sound, but enough to startle me. I tried to stay calm. I took a deep breath, telling myself it was maybe just my age, or that I hadn't slept well the night before. But then Sophia spoke again, her voice shaky, almost scared. "Grandma, it's making foam." I looked down, and sure enough, small white soap-like bubbles were floating on the surface of my soup. A chill ran through my body. Robert looked over immediately, frowning. "Why is there white foam here?" he asked in a distrustful tone. He put down his spoon, stood up abruptly, and turned toward Martha. "What did you put in here?" Martha jumped, squeezing the dish towel in her hands. I just added a little starch to thicken it," she stammered, blinking rapidly, as if searching for an excuse. I looked straight at her, trying to find the truth in her eyes, but I only saw a flash of unmistakable panic. "It's okay. It must have been the corn," I said in a low voice, trying to ease the tension. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. The unease was no longer a vague suspicion, but an icy certainty, sharp as a blade against my heart. Seconds later, my chest tightened, as if someone was squeezing it hard. My breathing became labored. Every gasp was a fight against an invisible wall. Robert turned pale, ran to me, and held me. "Mom, are you okay?" he cried, his voice broken by fear. Sophia, from the corner of the table, burst into tears. Her rag doll fell to the floor. I wanted to say something to calm her, but my throat was closed, unable to make any sound. Martha stood frozen in the middle of the room, still clutching the towel, her eyes wide, staring at me. I made an effort to sit up straight, looking her directly in the eye. In her gaze, there was no daughter-in-law's concern, but the fear of someone who had just been caught. Robert, trembling, took Sophia to another room and came back with his phone. "My mother is showing signs of poisoning. Send an ambulance immediately," he said, his voice urgent, almost pleading. While we waited, Martha walked back and forth, stammering, "I don't know what happened. Maybe the chicken wasn't fresh." Her voice resonated, but I no longer had the strength to respond. I only watched her, my heart heavy. Was I imagining all of this? Or was something truly terrible happening in the very kitchen I had always considered the heart of our family? The sound of the siren broke the silence of the alley. Robert lifted me into his arms, his hands trembling but firm. Sophia managed to open her bedroom door and ran after us. "Grandma, don't go!" Her voice tore at my soul, but I only managed to brush her cheek before the ambulance door closed. From inside, through the small window, I saw Martha standing in the doorway, her hands over her chest and tears falling. But her hands were shaking, and in that instant, I knew those tears were not from worry, but from the fear that the truth was about to come out. I lay in the hospital bed. The strong smell of disinfectant filled my nose, making me feel suffocated. The cold, white light of the fluorescent ceiling fixture illuminated everything with a cruel clarity, as if to expose every hidden corner of my mind. The room, small and with completely white walls, made me feel tiny, fragile. Robert was sitting next to me, holding my hand tightly. His hands, hardened by years of work, were now trembling. I felt his fear in every squeeze, as if he was trying not to let me go. In the corner, Sophia, my little granddaughter, was sleeping curled up in a plastic chair. Her cheeks still showed the marks of dried tears. She had cried nonstop when the ambulance took me, and now, seeing her asleep like a kitten, my heart twisted. I wanted to get up, hug her, tell her grandma was fine, but my body was still weak. Every breath was like lifting a huge rock. The door opened softly, a slight sound but enough to startle me. Dr. Celeste entered with a file in her hand. Her face was serious, her eyes sharp behind silver-rimmed glasses. She sat down next to my bed and spoke in a firm, grave voice. "Mrs. Dorothy, we have the results of your blood tests. We found traces of a very high-dose sedative in your sample. This is not simple food poisoning." Her words cut the air like a knife. I felt my heart shrink, not from physical pain, but from an invisible fear that gripped my chest. Robert froze. He squeezed my hand so hard it almost hurt. "Are you saying someone tried to poison my mother?" he said, his voice trembling, as if he didn't want to believe what he had just heard. Dr. Celeste nodded, without hesitation. "The amount found in the food is over 10 times the limit allowed. If you had finished that soup, your heart would have stopped beating." She paused briefly, letting us absorb the magnitude of what she was saying. We checked everything carefully. There is no mistake. The air became thick. I felt like I couldn't breathe, as if the oxygen had run out. Robert suddenly lifted his head, his eyes red. "What if you're wrong? My wife was the one who prepared the soup." He almost shouted, but I knew it wasn't anger, but the desperation of a son caught between love and loyalty. Dr. Celeste interrupted him, her voice still calm but cutting. We sent the soup to the lab. The results clearly confirm the presence of the toxin. There is no confusion possible, Mr. Robert. She looked at me with an expression that said more than her words could allow. I put my hand on Robert's arm, trying to sound serene. Calm down, son. We still don't know anything for sure. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. The image of the soup bowl, with small white lumps and bubbles on the surface, came back to my mind like a warning I had ignored. Martha, my daughter-in-law, whom I always considered a daughter, suddenly became an enigma that chilled my soul. I wanted to believe in her innocence, that it was all a misunderstanding, but the scared look I saw on her face this morning in the kitchen kept haunting me. Suddenly, a child's voice broke the heavy silence. Sophia, who had just woken up, rubbed her eyes and said in her usual innocent tone, "But I saw Mommy put white powder in the pot." The girl's words were like a stone thrown into a calm lake, leaving everyone paralyzed. Robert looked at Sophia with a mixture of astonishment and pain in his eyes. I saw him take a few steps back, as if he didn't want to believe what he had just heard. I gently put my hand on Sophia's soft hair, trying to keep my voice as sweet as possible. "Honey, tell the doctor, when did you see it?" Inside, I wanted the girl to tell the truth, but I also feared that truth would destroy everything I once believed in. Sophia looked up, her large eyes still half asleep. "This morning," she said slowly, as if trying to remember. "Mommy was in the kitchen. She put something white in the pot, and then she stirred it. When I asked her, she said it was her secret seasoning." She stopped and looked at me worriedly, as if she feared she had said something wrong. The whole room fell silent. I felt my heart stop for an instant. Robert stepped back and leaned against the wall, his face pale. "Sophia, are you sure?" he asked, almost in a whisper, as if he feared the girl's answer would shatter his soul. Sophia nodded, clutching her rag doll tightly. "Yes, I'm sure. I saw Mommy do it before she served the soup." Her voice was pure and clear, but every word fell on me like a blow. I looked at Robert and saw his expression change from astonishment to pain, and finally, to a doubt he was desperately trying to contain. Dr. Celeste wrote down Sophia's words without showing emotion. "We will have to inform the police," she said in a cold but firm voice. "This could be a case of intentional poisoning. I will hand over the entire file." She looked at me with a look that seemed to say she understood what I was going through, but that it was something that had to be done. A few minutes later, 2 agents in plain clothes entered. They took our statements, carefully reviewing the medical file. I managed to hear them murmur with Dr. Celeste. "This type of medication is not easily obtained. It could be from the black market." That sentence ran through me like an icy breath. I looked at Robert, who had his head down and his hands clasped, trying to remain calm. On the way home, no one said a word. Robert drove in silence, his eyes fixed on the road. Sophia fell asleep leaning on my shoulder, and her calm breathing was the only thing that gave me comfort. I gently stroked her hair, my heart heavy. I wanted to say something to Robert, to assure him that everything would be fine, but I couldn't. How could I comfort him, when I myself was drowning in fear and doubt? When I arrived home, it was already getting dark. The house, which was once filled with Sophia's laughter and the aroma coming from the kitchen, now had a strange coldness. Martha wasn't home. Robert said she had gone to visit a friend. I nodded, but deep down, I knew her absence wasn't a coincidence. I sat at the table and looked at the bowl of soup that had been left since the morning, now completely cold. Robert stood next to me, his gaze empty. "Mom," he said hoarsely, "we shouldn't tell Martha anything about this. The doctor said it was a heart issue due to age. Let's say that, okay?" I looked at him and saw his red eyes, as if he was trying to protect his family, even though he didn't know what to believe himself. I nodded and put my hand on his shoulder. "It's okay, son. I won't say anything." 2 days after leaving the hospital, my body still felt like an old clay pot, fragile and heavy. The doctor told me I should rest, eat light, and stay away from unfamiliar foods. His words were not just a medical recommendation, but a reminder that I had been on the verge between life and death. My house, once a sanctuary full of laughter, now felt suffocating, as if a wordless secret were hidden in every corner. That morning, the bells of St. Patrick's Cathedral rang in the distance, with a slow, deep sound, like a comfort in the middle of the storm I carried inside. I stood on the porch, a cup of hot coffee in my hands. The heat filtered into my cold palms. The paved path in front of the house was still damp with dew and shone under the rising Sunday. I took a deep breath, trying to regain some peace. But inside me, the doubt about Martha grew more and more, like a dark cloud covering the entire sky. Martha returned from the grocery store with a basket full of fresh vegetables, smiling as if nothing had happened. "I'm going to make you a little soup so it goes down easier," she said in her usual sweet tone. I looked at her, forcing a tired and tense smile. "Thank you, dear," I replied, but in my mind, I repeated that I had to be careful. Every word, every gesture of Martha's now put me on guard, as if I were playing a game of chess against an opponent I couldn't clearly see. In the kitchen, the sound of the knife on the cutting board mixed with the smell of browning garlic, but that aroma, which once symbolized warmth, now made me uneasy. I sat down at the dining room table, watching Sophia, who was in her high chair, concentrating on coloring a drawing of an angel. The girl was coloring with blue and yellow tones while humming a children's song. Every now and then she would look up and ask me, "Are you feeling better, Grandma?" Her clear voice, full of tenderness, comforted me. I stroked her hair and nodded. "I'm fine now, my love." But I knew I was lying. I wasn't fine, not because of my body, but because my heart was torn by doubt and fear. In the yard, Robert was washing the car. The sound of the water mixed with the bird song, creating a peace that seemed false. I looked at him through the window and saw his shoulders slightly slumped, as if carrying an invisible weight. I knew he was also struggling with himself, trying to maintain his faith in Martha, but Sophia's words in the hospital must have planted a seed of distrust in him. I wanted to say something to console him, but I feared that any word could break the fragile stability of this family. Martha brought a bowl of hot oatmeal and placed it in front of me. The oatmeal looked thick and smooth, with a hint of rice and a touch of onion, but I noticed a different, strong smell, different from any familiar spice. "I put a little extra oatmeal in it to make it thicker," Martha explained, placing the spoon in my hand. Her gaze quickly passed over me, but it was enough for me to feel the tension. I stirred the oatmeal gently, trying to keep my face serene. "Thank you, dear," I told her, and added, "But the doctor said I should only have milk today." Martha's smile froze for an instant, but I noticed it clearly. "Then I'll make you something else tomorrow," she replied in a sweet voice, though with a forced nuance. She turned around, took the bowl to the kitchen, and I heard her mutter something, too low to understand. When she disappeared behind the door, I carefully got up, took the oatmeal to the sink, and poured it out. The water washed away the creamy mixture, revealing a fine white powder stuck to the walls of the sink with a slightly pungent odor. My heart began to pound. That was not oatmeal. It was something I didn't want to imagine, but I couldn't stop suspecting it. I sat down again, trying to breathe calmly, although a storm was starting to brew inside me. I looked out at the yard and saw Robert concentrated on washing the car, as if that helped him forget what had happened. Sophia was still coloring, innocent and cheerful, like a small candle flickering in the darkness. I wondered, how could I protect her, protect Robert, when the danger was right inside this house? That night, when everyone was asleep, I stayed in bed with my eyes wide open. The wind blew through the window, bringing the smell of damp earth and a faint scent of magnolia from the garden. But that calm was only appearance. I heard soft footsteps coming from the kitchen. I wrapped myself in my wool shawl and went out into the hallway, hiding behind the wall. Martha's voice on the phone was low, hurried, almost a whisper. "No, not yet. She seems to suspect. But don't worry, I'll have the money soon." I held my breath, gripping the door frame tightly. Martha continued to lower her voice even more. "I swear, just a few more days. Don't call again, they might hear us." Her words cut through me like knives. Money? How badly did she need money to do something like that? And she, who else could it be but me? When she hung up, I heard water running. She was washing something. I peeked through the crack in the door and saw her carefully rinsing a small glass jar. The kitchen light reflected on the white powder remaining inside. She was inspecting it carefully, as if trying to erase any trace. I backed away, my heart racing, trying not to make the floorboards creak. Back in my room, I locked the door and sat on the bed, my hands trembling. I couldn't sleep that night. Every sound, the wind, the branches hitting the window made me jump. In the darkness, I understood with complete clarity. My suspicion was no longer just an intuition. It was a cold and terrifying truth, living inside my own house. The next morning, when Martha took Sophia to school and Robert left for work, the house fell into an unsettling silence. I stayed in the kitchen, a cup of coffee in my hands, but not drinking it. The heat of the coffee warmed my frozen fingers, but it couldn't warm my soul. A radio from the neighboring house was playing a melancholic old country song, as if telling my own story, that of an elderly woman trying to protect the little that remained of her family. I took the mop and went into Martha and Robert's room. The air was filled with a cheap perfume, mixed with the scent of the lotion Martha usually used. On the dresser, lipsticks, compact powder, and a red leather wallet were scattered, as if someone had hurriedly searched them. I stopped. I took a deep breath to calm myself. I knew I shouldn't be there, that I shouldn't invade my daughter-in-law's private space, but the suspicion was stronger than any moral boundary. I had to know the truth. I opened the closet. Carefully folded dresses hung on the top, and on the bottom shelf was a black wooden box secured with a lock. My heart was pounding, as if every beat reminded me that I was crossing a line from which there would be no return. I checked the pockets of Martha's jackets, hoping to find the key, but I only found pieces of paper, loose change, and some old envelopes. Then, a piece of paper fell to the floor, light but heavy as fate. It was a promissory note, and it clearly read, "Debtor, Martha Delgado. Amount, $300,000. The seal of the pawn shop, Fortune Bets, was marked in the bottom corner, red as blood. I took a deep breath, trying to control the trembling in my hands. $300,000. It was no small amount, especially for a family like ours, who lived on Robert's engineer's salary and my small savings. Who did Martha owe that money to, and why? I kept searching the papers, and underneath, I found a small, open zip-top bag with some white powder residue on the edge. I felt a chill run through my body. I knew that powder was not cornstarch or oatmeal. It was the same substance that had appeared in the soup, in the sink, and now, in this room. I took out my phone, my hands shaking, and took photos of the promissory note, the zip-top bag, and the other receipts in the drawer. As I searched further, I found a receipt from a pharmacy on the outskirts of the city. The name of the medicine was scratched out, but a small line could still be read: compounded benzodiazepine. I'm not a doctor, but I knew it was a type of sedative, the same one Dr. Celeste had said they found in my blood. I carefully photographed the receipt, every corner, as if each image were a piece of the puzzle of truth I was trying to put back together. In that instant, the front door opened with a dull thud, like a hammer blow straight to the heart. Martha had returned earlier than usual. I hurried to put everything back in its place, clumsy, trying not to leave any traces. I grabbed the mop and pretended to clean the floor, though my heart was pounding so hard it felt like it wanted to jump out of my chest. Martha entered with a cold look. "What are you doing in my room, Mom?" she said from behind me, without anger, but with a tone as icy as the night wind. I turned around and forced a smile. "Oh, I was just cleaning. This room is a bit dusty." My voice sounded false, even to me. Martha stared at me, with an expression that seemed to pierce me, as if she knew what I had seen. "You don't have to, Mom. I can do it," she said, with a weak smile on her lips that failed to hide the tension in her eyes. I nodded my head and slowly left. Every step weighed on me, as if I were carrying 1,000 pounds. As I passed through the hallway, I saw Martha's reflection in the wall mirror out of the corner of my eye. She was still there, watching me, with a gaze sharp as a razor. I tried to keep my face serene, but inside I knew I had just crossed a dangerous line. Martha was not stupid. She knew I suspected, and I also knew that, from that moment on, I had to be more careful than ever. That afternoon, I took the envelope with the newly taken photos and walked to St. Patrick's Cathedral. The bells resonated, deep and grave, as if reminding me that I still had a place to seek comfort. Father William, an elderly priest I had known since my youth, was in the courtyard tending some small potted plants. I handed him the envelope, my voice trembling. "Father, I beg you to hold this for me. I dare not keep it at home. I fear they will discover it." He looked at me, his eyes kind but full of worry. "Dorothy, what is this? What trouble have you gotten yourself into?" I briefly told him, without going into details. I only told him that I suspected someone in my house was doing something wrong. He took my hand, his voice serious. "You must be very careful, Dorothy. This is not a game. If you need anything, tell me." I nodded, feeling a weight lifted from me, though the fear still clung to me. On the way home, it started to rain. The cold drops hit my gray hair. I took shelter in a small pharmacy on the corner, where a neon light flickered in the rain. I asked the saleswoman, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, "Ma'am, do you sell compounded benzodiazepine here?" She frowned and lowered her voice. "That's not sold publicly, ma'am. Only smugglers get it. Why do you need it?" I shook my head, thanked her, and left. The icy wind cut my skin. Her words echoed in my mind like a confirmation of my fears. When I got home, Martha was in the kitchen. The aroma of pumpkin soup filled the air. She turned to me with a radiant smile as if nothing had happened. "Where have you been, Mom? I'm making your favorite soup." I smiled, but my smile weighed as much as my mood. "Thank you, dear, but the doctor told me I should eat something lighter," I replied in a soft but cautious voice. Martha served the soup in a bowl and brought it over to me, with the same sweet tone. "It's just soup, Mom. There's nothing wrong with it." I picked up the spoon. I stirred it a little, but didn't bring it to my mouth. The air between us became thick. All that could be heard was the tick-tock of the clock on the wall. I looked at her, she looked at me, and in that instant, I knew we were playing an invisible game. Martha was no longer the daughter-in-law I knew. She was an enigma, and I understood that, to survive, I had to keep pretending. I put the spoon down on the table and smiled. "I'll eat it later. I'm a little tired right now." Martha nodded, but I saw her gaze slide toward the bowl, as if checking whether I had actually eaten. I got up, went to my room, closed the door, and sat on the bed, my hands still trembling. That night, the house was silent. All that could be heard was the rain hitting the shingle roof, like a slow drum beating the rhythm of my fear. I lay down, my eyes wide open, unable to sleep. The yellowish light from the hallway filtered through the crack in the door, projecting shadows on the floor, as if narrating a disturbing story I didn't want to hear. Almost at midnight, when the wall clock chimed 12 o'clock, I heard very soft footsteps in the living room. The sound was slight, but in the silence of the night, it resonated clearly, like a warning. I sat up abruptly, put on my worn wool shawl, and slowly went out into the hallway. I pressed myself against the wall near the kitchen, holding my breath to make no noise. The wooden floor creaked under Martha's feet, and I heard the kitchen door open, followed by her hurried, whispering voice. Martha was facing away from me, her phone pressed to her ear, her voice hoarse and tense. "I told you I'm going to pay. Don't call me anymore. They've already started to suspect." Her words pierced my chest like a stab. I pressed my fingers against the wall, my nails digging into the old paint, trying not to tremble. The person on the other end said something I couldn't understand. I only heard Martha lower her voice even more, almost a murmur. "I'm going to get the money. I just need a few more days. That old woman is already very weak. Don't pressure me." That phrase chilled my blood. That old woman was none other than me. My heart was pounding, hitting my chest like a drum. I wanted to go out and confront her right then, but my legs seemed rooted to the floor. Martha went silent for an instant, listening, and then turned suddenly. I hid further in the darkness, not breathing, feeling that the whole world had gone still with me. Fortunately, she didn't see me. She hung up, poured a glass of water, and her hands trembled a little. Under the dim kitchen light, she opened a cabinet and took out a small glass jar, holding it up to the light. The white powder inside barely shimmered, like a silent threat. She shook it slowly, watched it for a few seconds, and put it in her coat pocket. I stayed behind the door, hearing her footsteps pass close by, soft but unsettling. When her bedroom door closed, I dared to come out. On the table, next to the glass of water, I saw some small white powder residues, perhaps spilled accidentally. I took a napkin, carefully wiped them up, wrapped them, and put them in my pocket. Every movement was slow, as if I were handling something deadly. I returned to my room, closed the door, my heart still racing. Outside, the rain was falling harder, and the sound of the water mixed with the wind, as if whispering the secrets I had just witnessed. I opened the drawer and took out the notebook where I had noted everything since the soup incident. Under the dim light of the bedside lamp, I wrote, 12 o'clock at night, Martha made a call. She talked about money. She said I'm weak. Every word was like a mark on my soul. Painful, but it kept me more lucid than ever. I knew what I heard was not a product of my imagination. Martha was planning something, and I, though old and tired, was not going to let myself become her prey. Suddenly, I heard her bedroom door open again. I turned off the light, got into bed, and pretended to be sound asleep, covering myself up to my face. Through half-closed eyes, I saw her silhouette standing at my door, silent for a few seconds, as if watching. I held my breath, trying to maintain a calm rhythm, even though my heart was pounding violently. Finally, she turned and her footsteps moved away. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed awake until I heard the rooster crowing in the distance, announcing the dawn. I didn't dare to close my eyes for an instant, because I knew that safety in that house was no longer anything but an illusion. The next morning, I tried to keep everything as if nothing had happened. I made coffee, sat on the porch, and watched the dawn light gild the stone path. But every sip tasted bitter, not because of the flavor, but because of what I had heard the night before. Martha came out of the bedroom, her face a little pale, but still with her usual smile. "I'm going to the market early to buy some fish and cook you something, Mom," she said in a sweet voice, as if that call in the darkness had never existed. "The doctor says eating fish is good for your health." I nodded and replied in a low voice, "Thank you, dear." But inside I promised myself that from that moment on, I would not eat anything she prepared. When Martha left the house, I turned to Sophia, who was in the living room drawing another angel. "Honey," I said in a soft but serious voice, "don't eat anything your mother gives you today. Wait until I get back, and we'll eat together." Sophia looked up, her big eyes staring at me with curiosity. Then she smiled. "Yes, Grandma." She didn't ask any more questions, as if she sensed the seriousness in my tone. I stroked her hair and felt a lump in my throat. Sophia was the only light in this house, and I knew I had to protect her, no matter the price. I closed the door carefully, locking the bolt. The morning sun entered the kitchen, but it couldn't dispel the cold inside me. That afternoon, the sky was gray, with heavy clouds hanging as if they wanted to crush everything beneath them. I sat in the living room, on the old armchair where I had spent thousands of hours over the years. The radio was playing in the corner, with the announcer's grave voice. Police warn about the illegal trafficking of sedatives in the New York City region. Citizens are advised to be cautious of illicit transactions. I remained motionless, the cold cup of tea in my hands. The name on the receipt, compounded benzodiazepine, was etched in my mind, reminding me that what I was facing was not imagination. It was real, and it was happening inside my own house. Outside, Sophia's clear laughter resonated like a ray of sunshine piercing the storm. She was playing with the neighbor's cat, running after it among the potted plants, her bare feet stained with dirt. Seeing her, I felt warmth in my chest, but only for an instant. I couldn't be carried away by her innocence, not when I knew the danger was stalking us. Martha was sitting across from me, flipping through a beauty magazine, but every now and then her eyes slid toward me, quick and sharp, like a cat watching its prey. I put the cup down on the table and tried to keep my voice calm, as if I were just making small talk. "Did you hear that, Martha? They say they're banning the sale of sedatives." My words were soft, but I deliberately accentuated the phrase, "sale of sedatives," watching her reaction. Martha jumped. The movement of turning the page stopped for an instant, barely perceptible, but enough for me to notice. She let out a nervous laugh, with a higher tone than usual. "That's probably something in another city, Mom. You know how the papers exaggerate." She lowered her gaze and continued flipping through, but I saw her hands tremble slightly, her fingers tightly gripping the edge of the magazine. I nodded, pretending not to attach importance to it, but my heart was pounding in my chest. Martha's response did not calm me. It only confirmed that she was hiding something. I got up and went out onto the porch. I needed some air to calm down. The wind blew, bringing the smell of damp earth and the aroma of magnolia from the garden, but it couldn't dispel the weight I felt in my soul. I looked at the paved path in front of the house, where Sophia used to run, where Robert used to take me on his old bike when he was a boy. Those memories now seemed distant, as if they belonged to another life before the darkness infiltrated this family. That night, during dinner, I watched Martha more closely. She continued to smile. She took a piece of pot roast and put it on my plate. In a sweet voice, she said, "Mom, eat. I made it just the way you like it." I smiled. I thanked her, but I only ate a few spoonfuls and excused myself, saying I was tired, to go to my room early. When the door closed, I sat on the bed, feeling like the whole world weighed on my shoulders. Then, like a wave, an old memory flooded me, as vivid as if it had happened yesterday. 2 years ago, one day at the end of the month, I went into the living room looking for my expense notebook. It was a normal day, with gentle sun, and I never imagined I would find anything out of the ordinary. But as I opened the door, I saw Martha next to the table, her hand inside the drawer, holding a stack of bills, the money I kept for emergencies. When she saw me, she jumped and dropped the bills on the floor, stammering, I just wanted to count the money, Mom." Her eyes were red, as if she were about to cry. I didn't say anything. I just looked directly into her eyes. That look was not that of a daughter-in-law I had once loved, but of someone cornered. She burst into tears, fell to her knees in front of me, and in a trembling voice, said, "I owe someone money. I just borrowed it. I'll return it tomorrow. Please don't tell Robert." In that moment, I sighed, put my hand on her shoulder, and said, "If you need anything, tell me. Don't do this. Poverty is not scary. What's scary is losing your dignity." The next day, Martha returned the money, and I thought everything had ended there. I thought she had learned her lesson, that she wouldn't do it again. But now, sitting in this dark room, I understood that I had been too naive. Martha hadn't changed. She always needed money, and maybe she was willing to do anything to get it, even hurt me, or worse, take my life. From the living room, I heard Sophia's laughter mixed with Robert's warm voice as they played together. Martha was also laughing, but her laugh was high and hollow, like an empty shell. I opened my little notebook and wrote, "Martha stole money once. It may be because of debts again." Every word written was like a stab, painful but necessary to keep me lucid. I couldn't let my emotions dominate me. I had to be strong, for Robert, for Sophia, and for myself. Late at night, when everyone was asleep, I heard the sound of a motorcycle stopping in front of the door. It was a slight noise, but in the silence of the night, it sounded like an explosion. I walked slowly down the hallway and hid behind the window curtain. Martha rushed out to open the gate and spoke in a low voice with a man wearing a black jacket. He handed her a small paper bag and immediately left. The engine roared, fading into the darkness. Martha closed the gate, hid the bag inside her clothes, and went straight to her room. I stayed there, my heart pounding and my hands trembling, and wrote in my notebook. 11:15 at night, a man handed her a small bag. It could be medicine. I sighed, feeling the world shrink around me, leaving only me and the secrets that were beginning to come to light. Outside, lightning cut across the black sky, followed by a deafening clap of thunder, as if announcing the storm that was to come. The next morning, I woke up with a heavy feeling in my chest, as if an invisible rock was crushing my breath. From the kitchen, I heard Martha's voice talking on the phone, in a falsely sweet tone. "Yes, I cook for my mother-in-law every day. She's very weak, the poor thing." She let out a little laugh, a crystalline sound that made me shudder. I stood by the door, listening, my heart pounding hard. When Martha came out and saw me, she jumped, but immediately smiled naturally. "My family was just asking about your health, Mom," she said, her gaze scanning me, as if looking for signs of suspicion. I nodded without saying anything, and went out to the porch, sitting in the old wicker chair. The golden morning light fell on the bougainvillea, but it couldn't dispel the cold I felt inside. Robert had already left for work, leaving the house submerged in a false calm. Sophia was in the living room, coloring a drawing of an angel, humming a children's song. Looking at her, I felt a little comfort, but also a deep fear. How could I protect her if the girl's own mother was, perhaps, the greatest danger? Martha brought a glass of orange juice and placed it in front of me. "Drink it, Mom. I just squeezed it," she said with a radiant smile, which failed to hide the tension in her eyes. I took the glass and observed the fine foam on the surface. It looked normal, but after everything that had happened, I couldn't trust anything that came from Martha's hands. I gently stirred the juice and said, "Leave it there for a while. I'll drink it later." My voice sounded calm, but deep down, I knew I would never taste that juice. When Martha returned to the kitchen, I silently got up, took the glass to the planter on the porch, and emptied it. The juice filtered through the roots, and I wondered if I was being too distrustful. But then I remembered the white powder in the sink, the nightly call, and Martha's terrified look. Everything told me that caution was now the only thing keeping me alive. At noon, Martha brought a bowl of corn chowder, steaming and fragrant, and placed it in front of me. "Eat, Mom. I cooked it with great care," she said softly, though her gaze rested on the soup, as if waiting for my reaction. I smiled, took the spoon, and pretended to taste a little, but I stopped. Just then, Sophia ran towards me, her eyes bright. "Grandma, I'm hungry." I put down the spoon and pushed the bowl toward her. "Eat, your mother made it for you," I said sweetly, without taking my eyes off Martha. She rushed to stop her, raising her voice louder than normal. "No, you can't. This soup is too spicy, it's not for you." The confusion in her eyes was so evident I could feel it. I looked straight into her eyes and smiled. "Oh really? I thought corn chowder was mild." Martha blushed, stammered something about checking the kitchen, and turned away. After the meal, I noticed that Martha always insisted on washing only my plate. "Rest, Mom, I'll take care of it," she would say, in the same honeyed voice, although her actions chilled my blood. I pretended to accept, sitting in the chair, watching her from afar. When she went into the bathroom, I approached the trash can in the kitchen. Inside, I found a small, recently torn wrapper with white powder residue on the edges. I put on rubber gloves, carefully wrapped it in a napkin, and put it in my robe pocket. Every movement was slow, measured, as if I were handling something that could explode at any moment. In the evening, as the whole family had dinner, the atmosphere was as heavy as a black cloud suspended in the air. Robert tried to joke, telling a story about a coworker, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. Sophia, innocent as ever, suddenly said, "Grandma, yesterday I saw Mommy put powder in the pot." I asked her, and she said it was magic powder to help you sleep better. Her voice was sweet and carefree, but those words fell like a stone into a calm lake. Robert let out a dry laugh. "Magic powder? Where did you learn that?" he asked, looking at Martha with a mixture of mockery and suspicion. Martha blushed and forced a smile. "Oh, kids invent things. It must have been rice flour I put in." She lowered her gaze and took a little vegetable with her chopsticks, but I noticed her hand trembling. I just smiled, saying nothing, but inside I knew Sophia had inadvertently revealed a key piece of the truth. After dinner, while Martha was cleaning and Robert was bathing Sophia, I quietly went to my room. I sat down, opened my notebook, and wrote. Sophia saw Martha put powder in the pot. She called it magic powder, powder wrapper in the trash can. Every line was like a stab, painful, but it kept me awake. I knew I was walking down a dangerous path, but I couldn't stop. That night, when everyone was asleep, I entered Sophia's room. The nightlight emitted a soft glow. I sat next to her bed and took her small hand. "My love," I said in a low voice, "if you see Mommy put anything weird in the pot again, tell Grandma right away. Don't be afraid." Sophia nodded and hugged me. "I promise, Grandma." I looked at her pure face and told myself that she was the only light in this house, the reason I had to keep fighting. 2 days after the corn chowder incident, early in the morning, when Robert had already left for work and Martha had taken Sophia to school, I took the small bag with the powder wrapper I had found in the trash. I carefully wrapped it in a napkin, put it in my purse, and left the house. The path to St. Patrick's Cathedral was familiar to me, but that day, every step weighed as if I were carrying an invisible burden. In the distance, the bells rang deep and sweet, reminding me that I still had a place to seek comfort amidst the storm. Father William was in the church courtyard, tending some potted plants under the morning sunday. When he saw me, he smiled kindly, but his expression changed when I handed him the small bag. "Father," I said with a trembling voice, "I need you to hold this, and if possible, have someone analyze its content." He frowned, taking the bag and looking at it through the napkin. "What is this, Dorothy?" he asked in a grave and worried voice. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "I think someone is putting something dangerous in my food." As I said it, I felt a mix of relief and pain. Father William was silent for a moment. His gaze reflected compassion, but also seriousness. "Are you sure?" he asked. I nodded without saying a word. He sighed and replied, "I know a pharmacist. I'll ask him to analyze it. Come back in 3 days." I thanked him, feeling a weight lifted from me, although the fear still clung to me. When I got home, Martha was cleaning the kitchen table, with slow movements but a sharp gaze. When she saw me, she immediately asked, "Where did you go, Mom? I was going to call you, but I couldn't find you." Her voice sounded sweet, but I perceived the tension behind it. I smiled, trying to remain calm. "Oh, I went out to buy some medicine for my blood pressure." Martha nodded, but her gaze dropped to the purse I was carrying, as if searching for something. I pretended not to notice. I went out onto the porch, sat in the wicker chair, and felt my heart heavy. That afternoon, when Martha went into the kitchen to prepare lunch, I stayed in the hallway, watching through the crack in the door. She opened a drawer, took out a small jar, and poured a little white powder into the pot that was boiling. Her movements were quick, but I saw it clearly. It was neither cornstarch nor rice flour. My heart was pounding, but I remained silent, waiting for the right moment. When Martha turned to grab the salt, I pretended to cough loudly. "Martha, bring me a glass of water, please." She jumped, put the jar aside, and came out with the glass. As soon as she was gone, I quickly took a little of the broth, put it in a small container, and put it in my pocket. Every movement was careful, as if I were handling something that could explode at any moment. That night, I took the broth sample to the church and asked Father William to keep it. He looked at me with concern. "Dorothy, you're getting into a dangerous situation. Have you told Robert anything?" I shook my head, speaking in a low voice. "No, Father. I don't have enough proof yet, and I don't want to hurt him." He nodded, though his gaze seemed to tell me that the truth, however painful, couldn't remain hidden forever. 3 days later, Father William called me. I went to the church, my heart pounding, when I saw the serious expression on his face. He took me to a secluded corner and said in a low voice, "Dorothy, a friend of mine analyzed both samples, the powder and the broth. It's a strong sedative, high-dose benzodiazepine. In someone your age, that amount could cause cardiac arrest." His words were like a knife, cold and relentless. I gripped the phone, thanked him, and sat on one of the church pews, remaining silent for a long time. The truth was already clear, but it brought me no relief, only another weight on my soul. When I returned home, the sky was already darkening. Martha and Robert were watching television in the living room. The blue light of the TV illuminated their faces. "Did you eat dinner, Mom?" Martha asked, in the same cheerful voice, as if she didn't know that I knew her secret. I nodded. "Yes, I ate out with a friend." She smiled, but her eyes slid over me, as if trying to read my thoughts. Sophia, who was nearby hugging her rag doll, suddenly spoke in her clear little voice. "Grandma, today Mommy didn't put the white powder in the pot like she usually does." Her words were like a stone thrown into a calm lake, leaving the room silent. Martha jumped and shouted, "Child, don't say silly things, it's just seasoning." Her voice sounded shrill, full of tension, and I saw her hands tremble as she put down the remote control. Robert looked at her, surprised. "What is Sophia saying?" he asked, somewhere between a joke and doubt. I intervened immediately, in a soft voice. "Kids say what they see." Maybe she didn't know it was seasoning, but inside, I knew Sophia's words were another piece of the puzzle. Martha blushed, smiled awkwardly, and got up to go to the kitchen, muttering something about getting water. The atmosphere in the house tightened like a stretched rope. I got up, went to my room, closed the door, and opened my notebook. I wrote the last line, "I have all the evidence. Now I just need to wait for the moment." Every word was like an incision in my heart, painful, but lucid. The next morning, when Robert left the house for work, Martha appeared from the kitchen with a glass of warm milk in her hand. She placed it in front of me, with a radiant smile but a cold gaze. "Mom, drink it. It will help you sleep better," she said in her usual sweet voice. I looked at the glass. On the outside, it had nothing suspicious, but after everything that had happened, I couldn't trust anything that came from her hands. The soft foam on the surface reminded me of the white powder residue in the sink, in the trash can, in the nightmares that haunted me. "Thank you, dear," I said, taking the glass without drinking it. I pretended my hand was shaking and spilled the milk on the table. A few drops splashed onto the tablecloth. "Oh dear, I'm already old and clumsy," I mumbled, trying to keep my voice natural. Martha quickly rushed to clean up. Her movements were fast but clumsy. When she leaned over, a small key fell from her coat pocket and rolled softly across the floor. I looked at it out of the corner of my eye, my heart pounding, and bent down to pick it up before she noticed. Martha didn't notice. She just kept cleaning the table while muttering something about going to get another rag. As soon as she said she was going out to buy some things, I got up and went straight to her and Robert's bedroom. The black wooden box was still in the bottom drawer of the closet, like a secret waiting to be discovered. I took out the key I had picked up, inserted it into the lock, and my heart stopped for an instant when I heard the soft click. The box opened, revealing inside a packet of bank documents, a savings book in Robert's name, and a thick envelope full of cash. I counted quickly. Tens of thousands of dollars, a sum I knew Robert couldn't have, unless he had withdrawn all the family savings. At the bottom, I found a sheet with a payment calendar, with crooked handwriting. $300,000, fortune bets. Deadline, this Friday. The name of that betting parlor appeared again, as a confirmation of my suspicions. I took out my phone and photographed everything. The documents, the savings book, the envelope with cash, the payment sheet. Every photo was one more piece of the puzzle I had been trying to assemble for days. I put everything back in its place, carefully closed the box, and left the room, my heart still pounding in my chest. The next day, I took all the evidence, the photos, the powder bag, the soup sample to the police station. Officer Peterson, a middle-aged man with a sharp gaze, received my folder. He examined every photo, every sample, and then looked at me. "You've done a great job, Mrs. Dorothy," he said in a grave but firm voice. "We will send agents to catch her red-handed. Keep yourself and your granddaughter safe. Don't let her suspect you came here." I nodded, feeling a part of the weight lighten, although the fear still clung to me. That night, I sat in the kitchen, watching Martha cook as usual. She was chopping vegetables, stirring the pot. Her movements were precise, but her eyes glanced at me again and again, as if she were watching me. I pretended to read the newspaper, but every noise coming from the kitchen made me jump. Then there was a loud knock on the door, unexpected. Martha stopped, still holding the knife in her hand, and a spark of panic crossed her gaze. I got up and opened the door. Officer Peterson, dressed in plain clothes, entered, followed by a partner. He smiled courteously and said in a calm voice, "We're here to do a routine food safety inspection in the neighborhood, ma'am." His gaze passed over the pot of soup simmering on the stove and stopped at Martha. She turned pale, took a step back, and tightly gripped the knife in her hand. "No, nothing's wrong," she stammered. "I'm just cooking for my mother-in-law." Peterson signaled his partner to take a sample of the soup. The man put on gloves, carefully took a little into a test tube, and sealed it. Martha remained motionless, her gaze jumping between me and the officer. "Are you from the health department, Mom?" she asked in a trembling voice, as if looking for a way out. "Why are you checking small families like ours?" I shook my head, feigning surprise. "I don't know. Maybe it's a new regulation." But inside, I knew the final confrontation had arrived. Officer Peterson looked at Martha. His tone remained calm but sharp. "We will analyze this sample. If we find anything unusual, we will return." He nodded toward me and left, leaving a heavy silence in the kitchen. 2 days after the police took the soup sample, I received a call from Officer Peterson. His voice was grave and serious on the phone. "Mrs. Dorothy, the sample contains a very high dose of sedatives, identical to the ones you gave us before. We will act today." His words were like an icy wind that ran through me entirely. I felt relief and fear at the same time. I knew the moment to face the truth had arrived, but my heart ached at the thought of Robert and Sophia. How could I protect them from the pain this truth would bring? That afternoon, it started to rain heavily. The heavy drops beat against the shingle roof, creating a sad music. I was sitting in the living room, the notebook where I had written down every detail of the last few days in my hands. But my eyes didn't leave the door. Robert arrived early, his face tense and his eyes red, as if he had fought an internal battle. He sat down next to me and said in a hoarse voice, "Mom, the police called me. They want Martha to come in for questioning." I took his hand, trying to keep my voice firm. "Let them do their job, son. The truth will come to light." Martha, who was folding clothes in a corner, stopped and looked up coldly. "What job?" she asked in a dry voice, trying to hide her panic. Before Robert or I could answer, there was a knock on the door, loud and determined. I got up, my heart pounding. "Officer Peterson, again in plain clothes but with an imposing presence, entered accompanied by 2 agents. He looked directly at Martha and said in a brief tone, "Mrs. Martha Delgado, you are under arrest for attempted poisoning and premeditated murder." The air in the room froze. Martha stood paralyzed, her eyes wide, and then she screamed, "No, I didn't want to kill anyone. You're wrong." Her voice cracked with desperation, but in her gaze, I saw terror, not innocence, but the fear of being discovered. Officer Peterson held up a document and added in a cold voice, "Then explain why we found poison in high doses in the food you prepared for your mother-in-law. We have proof from the soup, the powder, and witness testimonies." Martha turned pale, unable to say a word, tightly gripping the edge of her blouse, as if trying to hold on to one last hope. Robert backed away, leaning against the wall, his face completely white. "Did you really do that?" he asked in a trembling voice, as if every word were a stab directly to his heart. Martha burst into tears, ran towards him, and grabbed his hand, saying between sobs, "I had no other choice, Robert. I owe people money. If I don't pay, they won't leave me alone. I just needed some of your mother's savings." Her words were like a bullet, straight to Robert's chest. He pulled his hand away, with a voice that was firm but full of pain. "You chose the worst path, Martha. You not only betrayed my mother, you also betrayed this whole family." He turned away without looking at her, his shoulders shaking, trying to contain the storm of emotions within him. Before they handcuffed her, Martha turned toward me, her red eyes full of hatred. "This is all your fault," she screamed, her voice breaking with tears. I said nothing. I only looked at her, my heart heavy. I felt no victory, no relief, only deep sadness. Martha had been my daughter-in-law, someone I considered a daughter, but now she had become a complete stranger. The door slammed shut when the police took her away. The sound of the patrol car faded, mixing with the rain. Robert slumped into a chair, covering his face with his hands, his shoulders shaking. From the corner of the room, Sophia ran to her father, hugged him, and burst into tears. "Grandma, where did Mommy go? Is she not coming back?" I knelt down, hugged her, and my own tears fell too. "Mommy needs to go away for a while, my love," I told her in a choked voice. "But your dad and I will always be here with you." Robert looked up, his eyes full of pain, but also determination. He put a hand on my shoulder and murmured, "Thank you, Mom, for being so strong." I took his hand and tried to smile. "It's all over now, son." But deep down, I knew that wound would take a long time to heal. The truth had come to light, but the price was the destruction of a family I once dreamed would be forever. A week later, the kitchen was filled with light again, but the atmosphere was different. There were no longer any strained attentions or suspicious glances. Sophia, with a radiant smile, came out with a plate of still steaming pudding. "Grandma, I made this one myself, with no white powder like Mommy's," she said in a voice so pure that we all burst out laughing. Robert looked at her with tenderness, sweeter than ever. He took my hand and said in a warm voice, "Thank you, Mom, for not giving up. If it weren't for you, I don't know what would have happened." I smiled as I looked at father and daughter, feeling that a huge weight had finally been lifted from me. Outside, the rain had stopped, and rays of sun filtered through the clouds, bathing the bougainvillea in the garden in gold. I took a sip of coffee, listened to the sound of the cicadas, and thought, sometimes justice doesn't need the gavel of a judge. It only needs a child's eyes pure enough to see through the darkness. That night, Sophia hugged me and sing-songed a request for a bedtime story. I sat on the edge of her bed and told her about a brave princess who fought against the darkness to protect those she loved. She listened, fascinated, her eyes shining under the dim light of the lamp. When I finished, Sophia hugged me tightly and whispered, "Grandma, you are just like that princess." I smiled, stroking her hair, feeling my heart warm. In that instant, I knew we had truly escaped the hell that was once our home. I went out onto the porch and watched the sunset stain the bougainvillea red. The wind blew, bringing with it the smell of damp earth and magnolia blossom. I thought about the days past, the fears, the doubts, and the moments when I thought I couldn't go on. But I didn't give up. I got up, for Sophia, for Robert, and for myself. The life that awaits us still has many challenges, but I know that as long as we are together, no darkness will be able to extinguish the light of this family. From everything I have lived through, I understood that silence is sometimes more dangerous than poison. I used to believe that kindness and patience could change people, but the truth is that when you close your eyes to evil, you give it the opportunity to grow. Family is not defined only by blood, but by honesty and true love. I understood that trust, once betrayed, is not regained with tears, but with the courage to face the truth. And even if that means paying with loneliness or pain, I will always choose to stand on the side of justice, because sometimes it is in the deepest darkness that the light of truth shines most brightly. The story you have just heard has had names and places changed to protect the identity of the people involved. We are not telling it to judge, but with the hope that someone will listen and pause to reflect. How many mothers are suffering in silence inside their own homes? I truly wonder. If you were in my place, what would you do? Would you choose to remain silent to keep the peace? Or would you have the courage to face everything to reclaim your voice? I want to know your opinion, because every story can become a candle that lights the way for others. God always blesses, and I am sure that courage will lead us toward better days.